Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening, medical device world. Welcome to the inaugural Beyond Clean News You Can Use section, where we will be discussing some of the biggest news stories to come out in our industry. And we will be looking at the circumstances surrounding them and, most importantly, talking about how they impact your world every single day. So, without delay, I want to get started on first introducing our color commentator as it is. Hank, the biggest story to come out in the past couple of weeks has been not one, but two endoscope thefts from the Philadelphia area, one worth $450,000 from, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Lankenau Medical Center, and a second one worth $25,000 from Nazareth Hospital, both in the Philadelphia area. Large amounts of money just walking out the door. Hank, this is not the first time surgical devices have walked out the door. There's a lot we could talk about on this one, but what's your immediate quick read?
Well, it's not the first time, and until we really make some changes in the industry, it's not going to be the last time. A lot of these places still in sterile processing and even in the endoscopy suite have no tracking system. And if you have no tracking system, oftentimes it'll take you a while until you figure out that something has walked out the door. Now, it's a little different with endoscopes because they're a little higher dollar. If you start talking trays or instruments at the instrument level, I've got a feeling that this is a lot more rampant than even these news stories give credit for.
You know, it reminds me of a story that came out of, I think it was San Antonio, so down in your area a couple of years ago. And I talk about this story when I'm teaching a scrub tech's reprocessing curriculum about a guy who's sterile processing technician who, over the course of, I think it was about 18 months, stole somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500,000 worth of operating room equipment. And what's really craziest about that particular story is when they asked him why he did it, his response was because it was easy. You know, if you're a hospital administrator and that doesn't make you start breaking out in a cold sweat, I just don't know what will.
Well, again, that was a couple of years ago, like you said. It was easy then, and it's still easy today, unfortunately. And, one of the complicating factors with this, again, going back to the instrument level, most of these instruments do not have a unique serial number on the instrument itself. So if you walk out of somewhere with a clamp, maybe 400, 450 bucks, it ends up on eBay. There's almost no way to track it unless for some reason you're an early adopter in all this laser etching technology and you're able to get your unique code on there or the facility name. But again, you'd probably be a good saying 85, 90% of all of the medical devices in our sterile processing departments are without a serial number. And therefore, if you can get them out the door, you're halfway home.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about our favorite medical equipment buying location, eBay. I say that sarcastically, but the point is that if you shop on eBay, you will find medical devices there. So the question then becomes, where are they coming from? None of the OEMs are selling them there. So where do these devices come from?
I would be interested to hear because I know that there's lots of folks who buy off of eBay. Obviously, if there were not a market and folks would not be posting them to sell. However, I'd like to know why you're buying off of eBay. Obviously, it's a price conversation too, but if you take a step further, if you have no tracking history to where this instrument has come from, who knows if it came from a CJD case, right? And so you're buying this third party, no history, and you're bringing it into your facility to use on your patients, and you have zero ability to show that true safe history on it. I would be hesitant to do that, but again, I'd like to hear maybe from some of the listeners who are buying it and how you're working through that at your own facility.
Hank, you bring up a good point, and it makes me want to step off into the controversial deep end and say,
On mic.
listen, I know, hazard warning. Do you think that it's possible that chronically low pay scales encourage this type of behavior? Now, don't misunderstand me to say it justifies, because nothing would justify stealing things,
Yeah, yeah.
but does it encourage?
I would say, it definitely leads to the frustration level because, again, we see all the money that a hospital will spend on a new toy for a surgeon or on extra trays or on instruments that we just can't find anymore. They're
Mhm.
missing out of the trays, maybe they're getting thrown away upstairs, or we just keep buying and buying and buying and buying. And so our instrument spend budgets, they're always there. Oftentimes they're getting larger. Our staffing budgets, they're the ones getting squeezed. And you can only squeeze that for so long until you start seeing some implications. Obviously, like you said, we're not saying that if that is an excuse, obviously, for doing these kinds of things. But yeah, we're putting people into situations, maybe not um, on this level, like we have to walk out with a scope in order to pay the rent, but we are putting them in situations where they're thinking more about paying the rent than they are about doing the job. And that is not a safe place to be in as an industry or a facility.
I can't help but think about the explanation I heard on why the president of the United States gets a paycheck. It's kind of interesting because usually the president is fairly wealthy, typically does not need his paycheck. Yet it was considered essential by the founding fathers that the president gets a paycheck, primarily because if you don't pay somebody, it encourages behavior where they might be tempted to take bribes or do things that are otherwise illegal, or clouds their judgment. Again, I don't want to say we're justifying anybody's behavior because this is clearly wrong, but it speaks to the culture of the industry where we have a lot of people who are very frustrated and feel ignored, and it only encourages that feeling of being ignored when you realize that you can literally walk out of the building and no one's going to notice that you're carrying $500,000 worth of scopes.
Well, what's also interesting, and this goes all the way back to season one of the Beyond Clean podcast, talking to Kirsty Kennebody about all these vendor trays out there. These manufacturers have no freaking clue where
Mm-hmm.
these trays are. And some of these trays, again, $100,000 tray.
Yep.
And they could be in a trunk somewhere. They could be in a back closet somewhere. Oftentimes, and this is so frustrating as a sterile processing manager, is the facility doesn't know and the reps don't know what trays are actually consigned officially with a contract at the facility and which trays are consigned. So they just live here, but they never really have gotten approval, or maybe they're a long term non compliant loaner. All of that complexity for trays then again makes it much more difficult to drive
Mm-hmm.
accountability for what is owned and what is not owned. And do you know if you have everything that's owned?
Mm-hmm.
Heck, the great question here is how often are our facilities doing a total inventory of all your trays, right?
That's a great question. In fact, that was actually going to be my next question is, in your experience, do hospitals really have a clue how much of stock they have? In my experience, the answer is no.
Yeah, so to take that one step further, Mike, we don't even know what is supposed to be in our actual trays. Our count sheets are often so dirty and have no, they don't have any catalog numbers. The names on the instruments are different from tray to tray to tray. Maybe they're updated, maybe they're not. Maybe we know Dr. So and so likes to have two clamps, so we just throw them in extra, but we don't really write it down anywhere. So, yeah, if we don't know what's in our trays, there is absolutely no way for us to accurately track today what's in our total inventories.
And I'm going to jump off on another one of my hobby horses is a lack of security, specifically in the sterile storage area.
Mm.
Because I have been in a number of hospitals. In fact, I can honestly only think of one hospital in my entire career that had a good security system set up in their sterile storage area.
Mm.
And the general thought process from directors was that it's in a controlled area, therefore we don't need security. But if you don't have anything actively monitoring that area, and it's exposed by the fact that people can literally walk out the door carrying stuff, how do you know that the integrity of those instrument sets has not been violated during the time that it's just been sitting there? You don't know when a disgruntled security staff might have just walked through the area with no protective environment and just coughed on everything. You don't know. In fact, I know of a specific hospital, which will remain nameless, where one vendor was specifically sabotaging a competitor's sets
Oh yeah.
by taking syringes with fluid, probably just water, and injecting it into their sterile sets
Mhm.
so that during
That's
the case,
hardcore.
yeah, it's hardcore. So the idea is that if they open it up, they see the moisture, they say this is a wet pack, they throw it out. So they say, what have we got left in house? Oh, by the way, I've got your competitor's stuff right here. So
Yeah.
let's just use that, and boom, you just made a sale.
Yeah.
So if you can't verify that the storage area's integrity has been kept intact, even enough to keep it from being stolen, how do you know that the integrity has been kept intact to be used on a patient?
You bring up a great point. I'm gonna go back to Kirthy's interview again, and I forget the total number now, but it's in the millions. These vendor companies value a surgeon's relationship with the company in the millions over the lifetime of that surgeon. How long is he going to use our stuff?
Mm-hmm.
When that's at stake, human nature,
Yep,
human nature
absolutely.
all by itself is going to drive some challenging situations. So you're right. None of us are saying every vendor's bad and every vendor is gonna, cut corners and do things as extreme as that. But that's not the only facility that you mentioned. I've worked in facilities where we've had to throw reps out or have serious conversations because we couldn't prove it.
Mm-hmm.
There's like razor blade cuts,
Oh yeah,
and we're like, guys, you know, we don't know who's doing this, but somebody's doing it. It's got to stop today. But you're right, we couldn't prove it because there's no eyes on these trays, and
absolutely.
24/7 on the weekend, no one's there. All kinds of opportunities.
And those are the ones you know about, which makes you wonder how many are happening that you don't know about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we're going to keep an eye on all these type of news stories, and if we see any more pop up again with $450,000 walking out the front door or $25,000, we're going to talk about it again because until we see some serious solutions in the industry, I'll tell you right now, this clinic up in Pennsylvania had all kinds of patients on the
Mm-hmm.
schedule, I'm sure, the next day. And probably the day after that, this happens. Huge impact to patient care. It's sad, but these are the kinds of things, again, that we've got to get fixed.
Absolutely. All right, well, that concludes our news feed for tonight. Please tune in again for our next one as we continue to give you the news from around the medical device industry that you can use throughout the rest of your day. Thanks.